Next in our list of greatest fighting ships, a heavyweight of World War II, a battleship that could take its punishment, give it back, and never took no for an answer.
North Carolina Class Battleship. Displacement, 44,800 tons. Propulsion, quadruple steam turbines producing 121,000 horsepower. Speed, 27 knots. Range, 17,850 miles. Protection, maximum armor, 16 inches. Principal armament, 9 16-inch guns. Crew, 1,880.
Launched on June 1st, 1940, the USS Washington was the first of the new generation American battleships that called for better torpedo and deck armor, longer endurance, and gas protection. 12 days later, its sister ship, the North Carolina, was launched. Together, these two ships became known as the North Carolina class. But throughout their design and building stage, there were constant changes, due in part to an international treaty that limited the size of their guns.
The North Carolina, of course, was famous for having been designed as 3 quad 14-inch mounts with a little option to put 16-inch at the last moment, because there was a clause in the treaty saying, well, if the Japanese don't play fair, you can go to 16-inch guns.
And the North Carolina class's 9 16-inch guns were the answer. Firing a 2,700-pound shell, they had a range of nearly 37,000 yards. Initially coupled with 25-inch and 16 1-inch, they were formidable fighters.
Those ships were very successful both in surface combat as early as 1942. Also, there had been enough foresight to put a fairly large anti-aircraft battery on, and they were very successful as carrier escorts and as well as doing the supporting Marines and amphibious invasions.
By August 1942, the North Carolina was in the thick of the Pacific battles off Guadalcanal and Tulagi. It was in late 1942 that the strength of her torpedo armor was demonstrated, when after being hit by the Japanese submarine I-19, she had a 30 by 18-foot hole torn out of her side. Despite taking on nearly 1,000 tons of water, she managed to make Pearl Harbor for repairs. Meanwhile, the USS Washington went into action in the Arctic, covering the Icelandic convoys for the Allies. Finally, in late August 1942, the Washington was in the Pacific and demonstrated her firepower in the Battle of Savo Island when it took on the Japanese battlecruiser Kirishima. Using a mix of radar and optical fire control, the Washington in 7 minutes fired 75 16-inch shells and hundreds of 5-inch, which left the Kirishima a burning and crippled wreck.
You have to understand fire control. And the U.S. had, by the middle of the war, the best radar. It was so good that you could see your own shell splashes. And then, oh, I missed, I'll move it in closer.
The Washington had joined a very elite group of capital ships that have won a gunfight against others of their own kind. Over the next 3 years, there was hardly an action that the North Carolina class were not involved in. And as late as July 1945, the North Carolina was still covering carrier raids against mainland Japan. For 2 ships of the same class, both built to World War I standards and both surviving the bloody World War II, our matrix gives a good score for protection and innovation. Firepower and fear factor are good marks as well, but their short operational service life marks them down into the number 6 slot of our top 10 fighting ships.